Okay, you're ready to go.
Great, thanks, Tony. Good morning, everyone. This is a meeting of the city's Capital Committee. Today is Friday, January 6th, 2023. This is a follow-up meeting continuing our discussion about recommending a funding package for some of the capital funds we have available to appropriate. If you recall, we had the prior year operating surplus of about $24 million. And we are also making recommendations with pending general obligation bond issuance that was approved by voters last year. And in our meeting on Tuesday, it was presented an exhibit that had some of our recommendations on it. However, it was not balanced. It was about $3.5 million combined out of balance. And I know we also had some concerns, and we wanted to talk a little bit more about the police car issue and such. So what I would like to do is bring up the revised exhibit as it currently exists, and then we can delve into anything else we want to delve into onto some of the recommendations and such. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully you can see it. Did that come up? Can everyone see that? Okay. Is it blurry, or is it just am I just looking at it blurry? Maybe it's my eyes.
I can see it fine, Paul.
I can see it.
Okay, great. All right. The big changes here, if you remember, we had a $3.5 million gap. So the big changes here, the first one, if you remember, there was the proposal to purchase 100 police vehicles for take-home vehicles for the police. And that was let me zero in on that. Where is it? Here we go. I've highlighted some of these changes in red, so they stand out. So hopefully easier to find. And that was a $5.4 million request initiated by the Comptroller's office. When taking a look at this and discussing it, particularly with what we've already appropriated in Board Bill 184, we do know that we've got 60 vehicles already on. I don't know if they've actually physically been ordered, but they are in pending arrival from the funding that we appropriated last year in the Board Bill 184. Then in this year's capital budget, we had $525,000 just on the regular half-cent sales tax receipts that are allocated to the police, and that should get you another 9 vehicles. So knowing that, we were thinking, well, if the goal is to get to the 100, what would we need net of that 5.4? And so the dollar amount was $2.1 million. This would actually be, in today's value, it'd be about 105 vehicles. As Rich knows well, given the delay, you always have some attrition of vehicles out of the fleet. So we're thinking that's probably a safe number. But anyway, that was one of the big changes on this list that you see today. So that reduced it from 5.4 to $2.1 million, about $3.4 million. The other change we did, we needed another $150,000 to make up that initial gap. We did have $150,000 for the couple bridge items. And looking at the existing balances in some of the capital funds, we think we could cover that amount for those 2 bridge repairs. So we'd still be doing those repairs. It'd just be paid out of that some residual amounts in the capital fund. So doing that made up the $3.5 million gap, which I'm bringing up down at the bottom, and you can see where it's available balance. This exhibit also moved funds from each column. So for instance, we had some projects listed under Fund 1205. If you recall that we had to move over to GOB series in order to get the projects and the monies to match what is available from each source. So as I mentioned, we have $24 million available in the half surplus from last year, and an estimated $20 million from the GOB. And again, the GOB, that will be as an estimate at this point, but it will be nailed down as soon as when they get closer to actually issuing those bonds. So that actually balanced there. So those other red numbers you see on the sheets are just moving those over to make sure both columns match. And then I was off $1,000, so I reduced the fleet replacement by $1,000 to get that balanced out. So in summary, that's where we're at right now. That's the exhibit you see before you. I know there's been some discussions about potentially other issues we want to discuss. So, but are there any questions about that as it exists now? No. Okay. So let me, having said that, let me open it up and just open to the committee, and just let me know if you want to discuss some particular items. Just raise your hand or speak up, and we'll get into them.
Yes, I'll go ahead and get us started. If you could scroll back up to the top.
Sure.
After discussions with the alderpersons, one of the things we wanted to bring up was that the street paving, the amount that's being currently allocated to them, we're worried about capacity issues with the streets department to execute in a timely manner, given that they're behind on executing on street paving that's been funded by ward capital. So we'd like to propose that some of the funding from street paving instead goes to recreational centers to make immediate purchases that are needed now and can be executed now with these funds. So, and if either Alderman Cone or Alderwoman Boyd wants to speak to that at all, I'm happy to add your comments.
Great. Shane, did you want to jump in?
I just appreciate folks considering this, and I do believe that, you know, just given the backlog, I'll call it, and street paving that we have currently just with ward capital projects, that this makes sense to me to move, you know, paving and put it towards our recreation centers.
Okay. I can say, and we've had a little bit of this conversation, and I understand that. I will say that I don't think there's any belief that we don't need the money for paving. So what you're saying is that you don't think the capacity is there to get it done in time, or get it done in a timely way. Because I don't think you'd have an argument from anyone, at least I wouldn't, that we don't need money in street paving. If you look at the street condition of our streets today, I can't think of any citizen would say, hey, no, we're good with street paving. So I just want to make sure everyone understands that, because hopefully we can continue to contribute to street paving over the years on going forward basis. And I'm hoping that once whatever capacity issues you've addressed or you're speaking of are met and the thing gets going, that we don't suddenly stop because we have lack of funding. So that would only be my only sensitive area. I don't know if anyone has any other thoughts on that.
I do. I wanted to reiterate that even though we're pulling those dollars from the street paving, we already have other dollars allocated for street paving. And so, and Christina probably, or Nancy probably could kind of say the numbers, but I want to say it's 14 for one and 6 for another or something. So we do have money allocated for those street paving projects. And my concern is, like everybody else's, you know, when will we get it started? Because the street department did let us know that their challenge had been to get their equipment back and then the staffing. So that's letting us know it's not where it'll be a quick turnaround. And so we could utilize that money for the rec centers and go wait on the money that we have allocated earlier for the street paving. Am I on point, Nancy, or off? Because that's what I was trying to make sure.
I don't think you're on or off point. I think we have a difference of opinion. I do not want any money removed from arterial street paving. We did this budget. We submitted from the streets by looking at what was going into the Board Bill 120 to figure out the money. Our concern is that we have lots of times we're looking at doing large street pavements, not just filling potholes. We have staffing, but we would also contract out some of this work in order to get it done, and that it's time for the city to have a program where we are actually paving the major streets and arteries in the city that have not been paid for numerous amounts of years. And Rich might be able to add to this as well, but this is very much short of what we really need. When Kent Flake of the Streets Committee Commissioner did his number, I forget which commissioner he is, but he's the Streets Commissioner. When he did his numbers originally, they were well over 18 million or more that was needed to actually do the streets on a regular basis. And the goal would be to start this with using contractors and our staff, depending on the type of street paving that we're doing. And Rich can speak more to like the two different types that we do. So our goal was that when we got some of this funding, some of this was going to be contracted out to have it done in a timely fashion. So go ahead. And we have a lot of backlog in trying to get that done, and we have not had funding for this at all. And Ward Capital is not going to move this to where it needs to be done, because it's done ward by ward. It's not done in a way that works for us at this time. So I don't know, Rich, if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think you covered it pretty well. The two types of paving obviously are through your allocations that you do through your budget hearings with streets at the beginning of the year. And then the whole idea here was to hit major arterial streets, which are what we hit here. There was 14 million total dollars in arterial street paving, and there was $8 million proposed in Board Bill 120, the Infrastructure Board Bill, which left a delta of $6 million to come in this capital funding. Keep in mind that this $6 million assumes that the street department would pave, because as I've mentioned before, when streets paves, you pay for the asphalt, you don't pay for the equipment or the labor. The other food for thought item would be is if you're concerned that streets doesn't have the capacity or is behind, we have on occasion, over my history being here, hired contractors to come in and pave. But what that does in essence is it cuts the number in half, because basically now you have to pay for the equipment and the labor as well as the materials, plus a design fee in order for the contractor to understand what to do. So you get a lot less bang for your buck if a contractor does it versus streets.
So this is my question. So Rich, you said 14 million and 8 million has already been allocated for the street paving, correct?
It has not. It's actually in Board Bill 120, but
Okay.
Board Bill 120, I do not believe has passed yet. So technically right now we have nothing for street paving, arterial street paving.
Okay, and so the older people, they put dollars into the street paving project. So what part are they playing?
So what they're funding is typically your neighborhood streets, things along those lines there in your wards. Typically, they are not major arterials like the ones we are proposing here. These are your major north-south arterials in the city: Kings Highway, Grand, Jefferson, Union, whatever the list all entailed.
So could you give me and I'm sorry, because this is kind of little and I'm an old lady, so trying to read this little
Yeah,
print.
let me. I'll try to help out here.
Hey, so could you give me the total number of what this project will cost for? So it's the 11 million it would cost for the street paving. Is that what I'm seeing? No, that's bridges. Street.
So
Okay, it's
we put
7
in-
million.
we put in 6 million in this round out of the total of 14, assuming that the other 8 million would be picked up in Board Bill 120.
Okay, and okay, so Noel, he talking and I'm trying to read his stuff. So we had 22 million. And you said you added 6 million to the 22 million for the street paving. Is that correct? That's what we did for the capital funds.
So on this particular one, we had 14 million and 6 is here and 8's in 120, but Noel's point is also well taken. And I would have to pull that out here. Board Bill 184 also had, I believe it's 5 major arterial streets with paving in it.
Okay, and so is this encompassing this or it's in addition to, Noel? Is that what I'm hearing?
This is in addition to what Noel just asked about.
Okay, and so that will bring the total to what?
That's what I said. I would need to pull Board Bill 184 out and give me just a minute to look for that number.
Okay, because that's what I'm just trying to figure out, because I understand what Nancy is saying, but I do also understand that those rec centers have been long neglected. So I guess what I'm hearing from Nancy is, could we look somewhere else to start pulling those dollars for the rec centers than the street department? Is that what I'm hearing? You're shaking your head, yeah?
I think one thing I want us to consider too is the, best use of surplus funds. And we've talked about last time having shovel-ready projects. And it sounds like some of the recreational center expenses that could be covered would be shovel-ready projects, like they could be immediately bid out and taken care of, while we're just like adding to the backlog of street paving. And if we do have to outsource to contractors, that we're getting less bang for our buck. We're getting less streets paved because of just the extra costs of hiring contractors than being able to invest in our own streets department to increase their capacity. So that's just some of my concerns. And it's not that we don't think street paving is important, and we want to improve the process for investing in street paving in the regular budgeting cycle. We're also having conversations about the future of ward capital. So these are all things that are happening kind of in the background of this conversation. But yeah, I think I'm still in support of moving street paving, not all of it, but some street paving money to recreational centers.
So Alderwoman Boyd in Board Bill 184, there was 10,580,000 in street paving. In Board Bill 120, there's 8 million proposed, and in this tranche of capital, there's 6 million. So if you add all those together, that would be $24,580,000 in major arterial street paving across the city.
Okay, 24 million.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
doesn't that include looking at the curbs and the ADA issues as well as we look to do these street paving?
That's correct. I did not include that. There are a number of other items in Board Bill 120 that address additional curb work, ADA, sidewalk improvements, ramps, etc. Thanks, Nancy. And I believe that number is about another $12 million.
Right. And the idea of thinking that arterial street paving is not shovel ready, I think is not the correct concept on that particular issue, because the only thing that holds us up, my understanding is, from actually doing major street paving is, and Rich, correct me if I'm wrong, is the weather as an issue for that. And while we're looking at traffic calming, how we figure out where, if we're going to make changes on certain roads, we would do the street paving after the traffic calming. But putting this off any longer is not in the best interest of the citizens as a whole, which are talking about traffic calming, having their streets repaved, having better street markings and things of that nature, which you would put back in, painting the lines for the crosswalks and all of that would all come into this process as we did this. And all of that is to make the city safer for pedestrians, bicyclists, and drivers. And that hasn't happened here for many, many years. And the ward capital being used the way it is has not helped this process. But we want to see this kind of money put in to make the city a safer city for all the different types of mobility that is necessary. When you say shovel ready on the parks, or I'm not on parks, on recreation, I'd be interested to know what you think is shovel ready in that department. Christina, that's directed at you.
Yeah,
Noel.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that Noel brought up last time was the boilers, as an example. And, I'm not an expert on the shovel readiness of every individual item in rec centers. But given that some of their purchases, versus services. So, and since we have the problem with capacity in terms of employees, it makes sense to me that we'd make some investments in, or we would prioritize investments in equipment.
So
But happy to push to Noel too, if he has any extra comments to add.
Go ahead, Pam.
I guess my question, is it a compromise here in regards to this 6 million?
Well,
Okay.
I've been sort of quiet here because I'm looking at the list again and I'm thinking, well, what else can we pull
Right.
out? And this is sort of the challenge we always have, because
Yeah,
when you look at this, you think, that's why I have that total, that first column there, because I'm thinking, this is some of the stuff you have to say no to in order to get to where we need to be.
right.
And the only, I mean, if the arterials is a fixed number, based on what Nancy, you would, and the administration would like to pursue, then what I could try, and I don't know, Rich, you might kill me on this one, but I could try saying, look, I know you're shaking your head. Given that we've got some underspending in budgets this year in the operating budgets, I could put together maybe some transfers to make up for this 530 or miscellaneous repairs and allocate that to recreation. I mean,
What are you doing?
what's that?
You're wanting to take money out of miscellaneous building repairs?
No.
and-
What I would be doing was trying to create a transfer. I would have to go through departments and go through transfers and transfer monies in order to get some, and say, okay, maybe we can put that in recreation, and we'll do another transfer. Similar, just so you know, is updated. We are proposing these 2 operating transfers to address the roof and the public safety answering point for not public safety answering point, the roof and the fire alarm at corrections. So we are proposing transfers to deal with those that we mentioned because they were underspending. So what I was trying to do is saying, well, go back, trying to find some in the operating funds and make sure Rich has got his funds, and then allocate that to recreation. Does that sound amenable?
If I may jump in, for what it's worth, I've always found that the miscellaneous building repairs item for BPS, Rich really puts to great use.
Right.
And is a high impact fund. So I'm not going to comment on where exactly I think the funding should come from, although I will point to one line item in a moment. But I do certainly support investing in our rec centers and our youth. I think it's notable that the Citizen Advisory Committee for Capital Expenditures identified boiler replacements for our rec centers as the #2 priority need after the public safety access point. Public safety access point, I think, scored an 8.67 average. The rec center boiler replacement scored an 8.5. It was literally the second highest priority for our community advisory board. So I certainly support making that investment. As for where the money should come from, I agree it's tough. The line item I'd ask us to look at, and maybe we can also talk to Chris a little bit about, is the fire department vehicles. We were going back and forth by email about this, Paul, and it looks like at current prices, there might be $1 million there, but we do expect some price increases. I understand that as well. I think, though, that we could probably pull $2 million out of there, understanding that we would probably not be able to buy a pumper. We'd probably have to buy 8 pumpers instead of 9, but that's another option.
Well, there's a difference. You threw 2 things in there. You're saying change the number of vehicles that are being purchased. That's an entirely different discussion. If you're talking about funds that are available, and I'll let Chris elaborate on this a bit. He was saying that there is some residual money because of what was there based on if we give them the full 5. However, that's based on last year's bidding amounts. Given that you use next year's bidding amounts, that could all be eaten up. So changing the number of vehicles is a whole different discussion. Then you're going back to 184 where those number of vehicles were set. And so you don't want, and I didn't want to go there because I'm thinking, okay, now you're changing, you're basically reducing the number of vehicles and from 184, and given that you cited the Citizens Advisory Committee, Fire Department vehicles also rated very highly on that last year. So that's a different discussion. But Chris, could you explain? We discussed this a little bit about how the amounts that were available from the current purchase from 184.
Certainly, the amount of money that was put into the budget that ended up in Board Bill 184 was proper for the time that it was submitted. The problem was that by the time we were able to get the funding secured, put the bids out, get the bids back, the prices of all the vehicles had gone up between 15 and 30%. And that's because inflation's been a problem, but it's mostly because of materials and manufacturing costs going up. It's been doing that for everything. Refuse trucks, dump trucks, not just fire engines. So the amount of money was never enough. But had we had 4 million more and been able to move money around within within that fund, we could have bought some of those trucks. They're 4 pumpers, 1 hook and ladder, and 1 75-foot frontline truck, and an EMS van. They're unpurchased, and that's what the residual somehow from 184 plus this money would buy, is all that. So the basically what's happening is we were 4 million short of what we needed when we got the bids. But because we couldn't buy those, or 2 of the trucks that were funded but not funded enough, and cutting 4 pumpers didn't allow us to move the money around, basically it's costing us $1 million more to buy the trucks that were listed in Board Bill 184 than it would have had we had the money and the ability to move things around at the time. So there is no question now that those bids from August are no longer valid. It'll be a whole nother model year. Assuming this money or whatever money you decide you want to commit towards it is available, it probably won't be available until late April, maybe not till June, which means with year-end cutoff, we won't even be able to bid it till late July, which means we won't know what they cost till September. It means we're not going to get the trucks in until September of 2024, as it is. So we got 30 houses that have a certain array of trucks. The fire chief determines what it is that he needs in order to perform the mission he's been given. ESD maintains those trucks and we help with the chassis specifications. But what gets bought and what is required is completely a decision that the chief and director of public safety make. So I can't speak to whether or not, cutting 1 pumper or 2 pumpers is going to affect it or not. I would say that those pumpers are the least important of all the trucks we're considering. The hook and ladder and the Quint 75 are essential. We can't keep enough of them running, and we're having to substitute. We're still running a frontline model year 2000 Quint. That's the one being replaced by Board Bill 184, and this would supplement and allow us to buy the whole thing. So it's the problem that you have with everything, and you buy it or you don't buy it. And if you don't buy it, you have to accept the consequences of what it does to the operation. And it's all I can say is the chief says this is what he needs. And based on our ability to keep the right number of the right type of truck available to him on a daily basis, ESD agrees with him. I agree with him that this is what he needs to do what he's doing today. Now, if you want to change his mission, his number of houses, his number of firefighters, his response times, or anything else that would be affected by having fewer frontline trucks, then, you know, the equation changes. But if you want to keep doing the same thing, this is what it takes.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, well, that still leaves us with the question about recreation and where we could get some funds. So I'll keep that this open if those have ideas, but I'm just trying to. One thing I would like to do is that I'd like to get a consensus from this committee on where we're going to go forward from here, but two, I also don't want to get bogged down in not having something to go with. So again, if other ideas, if anyone had any thoughts on that, please speak them now. Given that for instance, on the recreation centers, what dollar amount are we talking about here?
It looks like the gap is 2,056,000.
Where did that come from?
The 3,056,000 identified as a critical need for boiler replacement, less than 1 million currently allocated.
Oh, well, yeah, that actually, I think if you look at what recreation submitted, they submitted pool renovations as a higher priority. So,
well, what I saw, the way I interpret that is we went back and forth about this, and I requested additional detail as to the breakdown of the $9 million, as well as the HVAC needs, and they did provide. So you're right. There's an additional 9 million in interior repairs of essential needs, and 6 million of HVAC needs. But
well, one, the list double counted some pool piping, because pool piping was on that list and we had it on our list as well. So that was true. But then this takes me back to the earlier ARPA considerations, where if this is such an important item that everyone wants to fund, why wasn't that included in some of those allocations? So that's why you always want to look at the entire picture before you do allocations on those kind of things, because once you get, I feel like we're at the tail end of the dog when we're looking at all these needs, and all the money's already been, the big dollar monies has already been allocated, and we're just trying to fit everything in this sort of small boot that we have to work with. So yeah, I think that's a big ask, given that you just had some other big allocation over there that didn't address this at all. So what I'd like to do is sort of come up with something to address some of the recreation monies that everyone can live with, and so that we can get a recommended package out. And so that's sort of what I'm looking for. With that, and again, and I know Nancy, you reacted, and I know Rich. Again, if we use miscellaneous building repairs and allocate that to recreation, I'll be tasked with identifying the funds to transfer to get Rich the monies he needs. Is that something that people could live with?
So the recreation, the miscellaneous building repairs, you and this little thing, that's how much? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, that's here.
That's 700,000.
Well, no, it's on this one. It's the 530.
Okay, so
that would be $500,000 we could allocate.
I'd
And
be
then we
willing to
go through what-
compromise.
What's that? Oh, go ahead, Pam.
I'd be willing to compromise. That's what I was saying. I'd be willing to compromise, because I understand what Nancy and them are saying. I guess my concern, and when I had talked about it earlier, my concern was how were we going to ensure that these streets will be paved? Because we do know that's been an ongoing issue. It's a safety issue. And so that's why I said, okay, they have dollars, and that's what I looked at. And then when Rich kind of gave us the numbers, that let me know, okay, it's enough dollars, but then I knew they didn't have manpower to do the work. So I didn't know a wrench had got thrown and they said, well, we're looking to contract out. Well, I didn't get that memo. I didn't know that one.
I just also have to add to this conversation with respect to street paving. I mean, if we're talking about calm and safe streets, paving them doesn't change that dynamic. That's restriping them. It's doing, other infrastructure things. Just repaving an arterial street doesn't, by virtue of paving it, make it safer. So spending millions of dollars repaving these streets, isn't going to do anything to make them safer. And our rec centers are centers of community that are, and particularly in my neck of the wood, Nancy and others, Dutchtown has the largest concentration of youth in the entire city. It's the most densely populated neighborhood. Marquette Rec is right in the middle of it, and it needs attention. And so, if you want to compromise, that's fine, but Marquette needs money and it deserves money. And, I don't think we need to do a whole analysis of every single rec center to know that Marquette could be more utilized and a better resource to our community if it was in better condition. And so if there is any compromise on the rec center, I would just ask that we fund Marquette and address the other ones later. But I mean,
we're not going to agree to do
from
that.
this selfish perspective,
Yeah,
all of them.
no.
Yeah, I'm not doing that either. I'm
Yeah,
not agreeing to no one site, no.
Yeah, I think that's what we'd like to be able to do, and is allocate funds to the departments that have identified and are responsible for maintaining the facilities, and they sort of use their knowledge of the utilization of the facilities and the need for the various facilities, the capital needs, to make that determination where it can best be spent. I would be reluctant to want to say, hey, it's that particular area. If that's okay.
I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying, these need attention.
Yeah.
And I would prefer for all of them to get the attention that they need.
Right.
But Paul, you keep reminding everyone's going to be upset with whatever happens in this committee. So take that for what it is. But at the end of the day, I represent an area that has a huge concentration of underserved youth that are at risk, that need these programs, need these services, need these rec centers, and we need to be investing in these communities. And so, repaving Grand again, you're talking to someone who's been advocating for the citywide capital to pay for these things instead of ward capital, because I had to pay for paving Grand out of my own ward capital account, and it was $200 grand for each section that I did. And it took multiple years to get it done. But I just, again, repaving a street does not, by virtue of spending that money, make it safer, unless we're talking about other enhancements as well. So I think that, that coupled with, the issues that we've had or experienced with just paving streets with our ward capital monies, we can better use those monies instead of, and I'm not saying that we don't put money towards paving, but I think that there's other methods and ways that we can go about doing that.
Latanya, I saw your hand was up.
Paul, I know we just stated that we didn't want to go into what rec centers would be repaired, but is there maybe a spreadsheet that you can provide to the committee on the total number of repairs per rec center at a later date?
Yeah, actually, we distributed that the last meeting. Well, last two meetings. The last meeting actually prioritized the ones that we had circulated in the earlier December meeting. So you should have that. If not, I could send it back out to you. It's posted online too, as well.
I can forward it to you, Latanya.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna, you didn't call me, Paul, but I'm gonna say.
I didn't see your.
Right, that's fine, because it's the background here.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna say this again. If we do things with the rec centers, we have to do them fairly in both parts of the city. But if you look at the number, you all want to increase and do all this stuff for the rec centers, and we have no data that shows us that that's going to change how much and how often people use them. We spent over $1 million on Booter, and it doesn't have high usage. We've spent money on different rec centers Some of them have done work and we've been able to, 12th and Park is an example. They have new basketball courts. They're looking for something else and they're being utilized, but we don't have a sense of how their everyone says we need more rec centers. People aren't going to the rec centers. And what you're all saying is if we build it, they will come, but we don't actually know that. And so I'm okay if people are going to be insistent on putting more money into rec centers at this time, and you can come up with the money from miscellaneous and find money in other areas that hasn't been spent yet, we can work with that. But we do need to keep the miscellaneous building. I need to have a sense from you that we are going to be able to have and find up to 700,000 because of the number of things that happen that are unanticipated that Rich has to fix during the year. So if we can do that, and then you take the money from that and put it in the rec centers, we can live with that. And then we'll prioritize in the operations department with Rich and Greg, which ones we fix and where we go and look at fixing them first. But this committee is not a committee of operations people that deal with operations. And I appreciate what you're all saying and in your input, but the reality is you don't live this day to day. And since I've gotten here, one of the biggest issues has been about the arterial and the street paving and when are we going to pave the streets? And there's been an internal fight between alder people being asked to pave for streets and people thinking the streets department should pave for streets. So we've moved to having the streets department pay for streets by using ARPA money. It's our capital money, so that it would become maybe a stabilized thing that happens. So if there's a way to move this money for the miscellaneous, and you can come up with, get him back to 700,000 again and add that into rec centers, then we can live with that and leave the rest of it alone. At this point, that would be my amendment to this.
Okay, well, actually, I'm talking to 530 because I don't want to mess with the GO side of it. So,
Okay, so the
yeah,
530, I would ask that you amend to put the 530 into rec centers.
into rec centers. Is it the boilers that we wanted to put it in, the boiler line?
You said there was another item that was more important to the.
Well, I mean, the pool renovations were the one they
More expensive.
look at their, were the ones. I mean, I think what we might want to do, and when the board bill also was introduced, is that we've got the ability to transfer within those groups, so that we don't lock ourselves in case, let's say, the boiler explodes and we got it over here in the pool, but the pool breaks and we need it from boiler, that kind of thing. So, so that gives us that flexibility. But yeah, we can. For now, we could put it in either one.
I'll just flag that there's currently no line item for the recreation center interior improvements. So maybe just a generic line item for recreation center improvements, including.
So, no.
Well,
No.
yeah, let me jump in, Nancy. Hold
on a second,
Okay.
Paul. You are all advocating that you want the boilers fixed and that was the number one thing from the citizen advisory group that they wanted to see. So if we need to fix all the boilers and that's where you think it should go, then that's where we're putting it. As far as the interior and everything else, we'll figure that out in operations and with our budget going forward. But you're saying you want more money to put into the boilers, and that's what the Citizen Advisory Committee offered. That's the only way I'm offering this amendment.
I was suggesting it for
hold on, Noel, and I was going to jump
No.
in. I was going to jump in here, just sort of to say, and this is how when we look at a lot of these projects, where the critical, needed, and all. Remember, these were the needed ones, and when you look at it, and just if you stand back and look at it and say, okay, what's the biggest crisis you could have in recreation? Summer comes up and you can't open a pool. That's more critical than, okay, this area of a rec center needs to be spruced up, because you can still use it. It might not be as nice, but you can still use it. A pool shutting down in the summer is a critical thing. Same thing in the winter if a boiler breaks. That's why when you're looking at these things, and again, they all need attention. We want to be able to focus on the priorities, and so that's why I would think you'd put it in either the boiler line or the pool line, and let's go from there. And that's sort of my thought.
My only concern, and the reason I suggested the single line item, is to provide operational flexibility to the Recreation Division to determine its highest priority needs. But my only concern with putting it directly in boiler or pool is that this is $530,000, not the full $2,056,000 that's needed for boiler replacements. I don't know how much boilers cost. I don't know how much these pool renovation costs. And perhaps we're going to wind up with an increment at some point of 50,000, 75,000 left over, and the ability to use those for some interior improvements might be desirable.
Well, I think what you're going to end up with is that if you don't use it in the boilers, you're going to need it for pools. And if you don't need it for pools, you're going to need it for boilers, because neither one is fully funded, and both of those are critical. So
I'm fine with boiler and
Yeah.
pool if we can get up to the.
yeah,
Yeah, we're fine with either.
you good? Okay. And then I will task myself with making sure Rich has got that 530 back somewhere, and I'll have to go through this as a transfer. So ENA's keep your ears out, because I'm going to have to go through that process to get him, make sure he has those monies. So is that, do we have a motion? Nancy, you had suggested taking the 530 out from the miscellaneous, putting it up. Let's say it's boilers. Is that
Yes.
okay? Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Pam. All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Do I need to take a roll call, or do we want to?
Roll call.
Roll call.
Okay. Okay. Let me make sure let me stop sharing here so I can pull up, okay. And I'm just gonna go down the list. Latanya,
Aye.
Noel,
Although I have reservations because this really is a great fund that Rich.
I-
very well.
we're just voting.
Aye.
Okay. Pam,
Aye.
Shane,
Present.
Judy. Is Judy with us? I see you're.
Aye.
Okay, great. I missed my place. Nancy,
Aye.
Latanya, did you already? I think you already voted. And Rich,
Aye.
and I for myself. Okay, great.
Hey, you
Did
skipped
you
me.
get Christina?
Oh, Christina,
Christina.
the list kept jumping, and when do we do this? Christina,
Aye.
great, thank you. All right, so we've got an amendment that moves the 530 up from miscellaneous building to rec centers. Can we get an approval of this as a recommendation so that we got something to put a bill towards the Board of Aldermen?
I move that what's the bill number? I'm
Well,
sorry.
it wouldn't have a bill number, but basically we'd have to put a bill together that would comprise, well, let me put it this way. This would be the funding package we're recommending for these projects, utilizing both the half surplus from prior year as well as the GOB. And then the bill would have to appropriate the half surplus, and that's the bill we'd have to introduce.
What
so-
you just said, Paul, what you just said.
Okay, so Pam has offered a motion that would approve the recommended funding package as amended for rec centers.
Alderman Cone will second it.
Thank you, Shane. All right, do we need another roll call, or can we just? Okay, let's do a roll call. Pam,
Aye.
Rich,
Aye.
Shane,
Aye.
Judy. Judy?
Can you not hear me?
I couldn't hear you. You vote?
Yes, aye.
Okay, great. Christina,
Aye.
Latanya,
Aye.
Noel,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. Did I forget anybody? No. Great. Okay, I think we have something to work with. Again, I know this is difficult at times when we're going through this stuff. I think that the capital committee is something of a special committee because it has representations from ENA, 2 members of the Board of Aldermen, Rich is head of BPS, got CDA director, myself, and so, well, ultimately, any recommendation is subject to approval of the Board of ENA and the Board of Aldermen. I think with us participating as well as input from the Citizens Advisory Committee, there's a lot of work that went into this. So hopefully it will lead to some good things down the road and we can get some projects done. But thank you for that. And we'll have to work on getting that bill introduced next week. Is there any other business that we have for the committee? Any other comments? Okay, thank you all. And have a good-
Thanks, everyone.
good one.
Thank
Thanks.
you.